Well, hello everyone, and welcome to my channel, the John King Saga 7847 and 6 Elemental Interviews. This is one of those spectacular days that I've been looking forward to for a while now, because today I get to interview three fabulous creatives almost all in a row. The first interview I have is with someone who I believe that many people, especially in the spaces we occupy, particularly the indie science fiction and fantasy community, would consider someone who is iconic. And yes, I'm talking about you, Dyrk. Yeah, it's you. Someone who I consider iconic, someone who was publishing indie fantasy, started publishing indie fantasy in that era when it wasn't as cool as it is now to be an indie author. And so he's one of the trailblazers. He's one of the OGs. He's one of the people that people like myself will look up to for guidance and inspiration. And he's a phenomenal guy, and can't wait for you all to learn more about him and for myself to learn more about him. The phenomenal Dyrk Ashton. How are you doing today, Dyrk?
Well, I'm done. You've said it all. I should just leave. We should just leave it at that. Great to be here, PL. Thank you very much for having me on. The nicest guy in fantasy. Absolutely. Everybody says that. I got to meet PL over at Worldcon in Glasgow this year. That was a joy. We were sitting with Christian Cameron, who is also a joy, who I had met personally and hung out with quite a bit at Worldcon Dublin some years ago. So it was great to see him again and get to hang out with you and meet the nicest guy. Even Christian said he's the nicest guy.
Oh my gosh, you're too kind. And it was such an amazing experience to meet you. That was, definitely one of the highlights of my trip. And meeting all of the amazing creative, like these people that you form these bonds with online, and you never meet them in person, and then you get the opportunity to do it. It's like kind of like a dream come true. It was a real thrill. You in particular, sir, and it's funny that you mentioned our mutual friend, Christian Miles Cameron, in that I have dubbed, and besides him being a wonderful human being like yourself, I have dubbed him the most interesting man in the world, like the Dosaki's commercial.
Yeah, he is. He really is. The stories, his background, all the things that he knows and he's done. Yeah, he should be on that commercial.
Yeah, he has. But you know what, sir? Over the years, learning about you and doing a bit more research, I've learned you could probably hold that moniker yourself, considering some of the things that you've done. So we're going to learn a little bit about that. So I'm just going to quickly put up in the chat. Hey, Shad, what's up?
Hi, Shad.
How's it going? Friend of the channel, Shad, great guy. Had the honor of meeting Shad in person as well a while ago at a con, at London, Ontario Comic-Con. And Shad Oates, huge fan of Paternus trilogy.
Yeah, Shad has been one of my biggest supporters over the years. It's great to see him.
He's a great guy. And Paternus, I've read the first book. There you go. It is absolutely like, Beth Tabler, my wonderful boss at Before Go Blog. Shout out to Beth and the Before Go Blog crew. Beth has been, as long as I've known Beth, she's been raving to me incessantly about reading this book. I'm like, no, it's definitely going to get to it. I'm going to get to it. And, it was always on my TBR, and I just hadn't gotten to it yet. But we will be talking about your book and your writings, but wow, was I just, I was.
You don't have to say that just because.
I don't have to say that, but I'm saying because it's true. I was blown away. Like, I'm a history nerd.
Oh,
right?
Okay. Yeah.
My degree's in English with a minor in history, medieval English literature with a minor in history. I'm a history nerd, and you can imagine how many boxes this was ticking as I'm going through, and I'm like, oh, so that's in there. Oh, so that's in there. Oh, so that's there. Oh, so that's part of it. And just it was. Anyways, we're going to talk about this and your writing soon enough. But first, I said that you could potentially qualify for the title of the most interesting man in the world. So you, sir, my friend, have done a lot, it seems, in your life. including being an actor. Uh, can you tell us a bit about that aspect?
Um,
Um,
sure, sure. I actually was a film guy. I always loved movies, and I always loved to write. And I actually got my undergrad is from the Ohio State University um, uh, in film production. And then I have a master. Then I stayed and got a master's in film production at Ohio State, and I wanted to work in Hollywood in the movie business.
wow.
Um, and we made a lot of short films of our own. We actually, friends of mine and I actually started up a company in Columbus, Ohio, where I had started as, while I was still in school, uh, as a production assistant, and then grip, and worked my way up and ended up production managing and producing some commercials and industrial films. And we did a spec pilot for a TV series that we pitched, flew out and pitched in Hollywood, called Tiger Edge Technopunk back in the 90s, when that stuff was a thing. And uh, then I moved to LA in 94 and stayed on a buddy's couch for almost a year until but I got I needed to do something to make a living, right? So I did all kinds of stuff. I did editing. I worked on some crews, construction crew stuff. My buddy John Sullivan got me into some of that stuff. I did some editing on some low budget features, but I had, because we had made all this stuff and I was in most of them, just because you have to have somebody to be in them. I had a lot of reel, and I actually put together a VHS tape reel. At that time, we were still doing that, right? In the mid 90s, and just sent it out to some agents. And I actually booked an agent and um, started working. And within a month or two, I got a part on uh, the Fantastics. And they flew me out to uh, Arizona, Nogales, right on the border, which is where we shot a lot of that. And I was there for a couple of weeks. And that got me into the Screen Actors Guild right there. They had to, what's called a Taft-Hartley, because I wasn't in before. Um, so they did that paperwork and got me into the Screen Actors Guild. And so it was all kind of by accident. I never meant to be an actor. And I was actually a very poor actor, but I was really good at auditioning because I had worked on the other side. I had sat in on so many auditions for projects that I had worked on that, and I could remember the short enough lines that that I was able to get my way through. I did a lot of commercials and music videos, um, and the biggest thing that I did was a co-starring role. Actually, was the credit they gave me, with an upfront credit on Rudyard Kipling's The Second Jungle Book, Mowgli and Baloo. It's a kids movie, live action, that was shot in Sri Lanka, and I was over there for 2 months, um, up in Kandy, in the middle of the country. It's like, a mountain that goes up, an island, big island, just off the coast of India, and spent 2 months there and did that. But yeah, I was really lucky. I I was getting a couple of auditions a month and booking a really high percentage of them, because if they wanted somebody that looked like me, they got me, um, and that was it. Who else? And and it was bad guys almost always, right? So I lucked out and made a lot of my living doing that, but I still filled in by working all kinds of crew positions, and writing screenplays and pitching screenplays. And I had scripts read by um, American Zoetrope, Francis Ford Coppola's TV company, and they act. That was actually a pitch for a TV series, and they picked that up, but it ended up getting turned down by the financiers out of Canada. So that never happened. And that was a series called Death Drives a Cadillac, based on a screenplay that I had written, feature screenplay that I had written. I wrote a bunch of screenplays that just never went anywhere. But I had another thing called The Wishman, which was basically a superhero kind of thing before those were really happening. And it got read by who was it? New Line Cinema. And
What?
the biggest ones, yeah, with New Line Cinema. You're old enough to remember New Line. They're
Yeah,
not
they
around
did.
anymore.
Yeah, they did. Didn't they do the Peter Jackson movies? I can't remember.
They had them originally.
Originally, right? Yeah.
Originally, they had them, and then they sold.
Then they sold them
to Miramax.
Yeah. But originally they had them. Yeah.
Yep. And
dude,
yeah,
wow.
That would have been fun, but they turned it down. And meanwhile, I was also pitching to agents and everything, and I never really got a writing agent. Some friends of mine helped me out, but I never really got one. And the other one was Scott Free, Ridley Scott, and his brother's company when his brother was still alive. And they liked it, but they also turned it down. So I mean, things were going okay, but you have to, I mean, LA's an expensive town, right? And there's a lot to love and a lot to hate. So I ended up moving back to Ohio in 2000. And within a year, I had applied to and taken my GRE and gotten into school at Bowling Green State University for my PhD in cinema studies. And so I did that, got that, and have been teaching ever since. I was full-time at University of Toledo, their theater and film department, teaching, history, theory, critical studies, and also production, since I had the production background. So I was teaching 16 millimeter. We were still doing that, and video production and screenwriting at that time. And I still teach. That's my day job online, but all online now. In 2010, I went all online, and that's what gave me the opportunity to write books, which is something I had always wanted to do. And, for anybody who thinks you might be too old to start, I was 50 when I was over 50 when I started writing the first Paternus book. So, that was the first full-length novel, other than a thing I wrote in pencil when I was in high school that was terrible and never really finished. That was the first real novel that I wrote, but it took me 3.5 years to write it. So write it and rewrite it and rewrite it and change it and rewrite it. It was originally what was 2 books, or what was 1 book, I actually cut way down. And well, it was going to be 2 books. I cut it way down and combined it. Boy, I can't believe it's like been over 8 years now since Paternus came out in 2016. Yeah, it's nuts. And so, I've been teaching and writing ever since, and it's been pretty great. It feels like I've lived a lot of different lives.
Wow, I'm listening here. I'm just flabbergasted. Mouth is just dropping, hearing about your background, in the film industry, and just like I mean, I certainly am no expert, but my understanding is that you don't even get to pitch things at the level which you've pitched unless someone thinks you got to. Like, you don't get to pitch to Ridley
No,
Scott,
no.
Francis Ford
Yeah.
Coppola. You don't get to there unless your stuff is well regarded and well thought of, and someone really backs it. So, I mean, I think you're being modest, but holy moly, did you have a career there in the film
Yeah,
industry?
there were a lot of almost big deals, a lot of almosts. And I was also, as a producer, I also was the last thing that I did was I was producing a film and we had some of the funding. It was only a $300,000 feature, independent that I was that I was doing, and then when it came time for production, the finance guy just did not send the final check. He said he did. He said he was going to, said he did, and then he went on vacation for a month to Mexico and was going to be out of touch. So that's when I decided, you know what, maybe I won't die if I never get to make a film. I think I might. And I was getting older. My sisters were having kids. Um, and I decided that I would just go back and maybe go to school, and I did, and I'm really glad I did. It all worked out really well. Yeah, and
Wow.
yeah, and we'd actually I had a really fun script that almost went. That would have been larger, maybe $1.5 million, $2 million budget. But the guy that I was working with insisted on directing it, and the production company really didn't want that. And once, one thing that I told him before we went in, we sat and had some coffee. I said, if we don't make a deal by the time, this was with crap. I'll think of the name of the production company. They make a lot of stuff for like Sci-Fi Channel and things like that. And he was a really neat guy. This guy, he was, and the script was great. People in American Zoetrope read it, and they actually referred it over to these guys. So we got the meeting. But if you don't get the deal by the time you walk out, there is no going back and renegotiating. And I told him that, and that's exactly what happened. But there were a lot of other smaller things that we tried to get going. So a lot of really close, but it just wasn't working out to my satisfaction. But I have always wanted to write books, and the ideas, the insane conglomeration of ideas that I'd always had, all came together in Paternus. So, and again, I've been really lucky with that because it's really hard to get an early film noticed, and it's all thanks to the SPFBO, really.
Wow, that's like I said, just incredible. Just your background, and I just before we leave the whole film stuff, and I mean, it sounds like but by a little turn here, like you said, a little turn there, I'd be talking to Dyrk. Well, probably I wouldn't be speaking to Dyrk Ashton, famous
I
famous.
hope you would be.
When you'd be a bit. I mean, not that you weren't very big in the indie world and big as an author, as I said, you're iconic, but I don't know if I could. I'd have to go through your assistant to talk to you, just to talk to you. So, but I'm just curious. I do want to ask you, don't mind, like, so in all the acting stuff and the producing stuff and the screenwriting. So, were you ever in any like films as any big like films as like an extra, or you told about the co-star credit you got?
Mhm.
Like, what were some of the things that the highlights?
Well, probably the biggest thing was one of the early things, maybe one of the very first things I got was as an extra in Men in Black. So I was on that for 2 weeks, and
Wow.
and a lot of it is just sitting and waiting. So I was actually handwriting one of the screenplays I was working on, and then typing it at night after I got home. sit there in the lunchroom and just write that stuff. And they'd call us to set. And we'd go. I show up for about 4 seconds total in the film, in the big headquarters when Will Smith first gets taken down.
Yeah.
That elevator by Tommy Lee Jones, and I'm standing in line there. But I got to meet Will Smith, was really nice, and so was Jada. They were still married, of course, at
Yeah.
that time.
Back then, yeah.
And it's funny because he's like 6'5" and she's like 5 foot
Yeah.
tall. And they were both really nice, and they just, shaking hands. And Tommy Lee was a little more standoffish, but that guy has the biggest head of any human being I've ever seen. Insane. He's also a big guy, big, tall. Well, he was a football player.
Yeah, he was.
Broad shoulders. He was nice enough, but not. I mean, Will was just plain friendly, just outright friendly, and funny to work with. He actually he walks past me, and as I'm at those counters, and he actually looks right at me, which is kind of funny. But and then there's if you watch that scene, there's like this alien in this rubber suit and a little bitty one, like a baby one, that's like running around, and she grabs it. That's actually the guy who played Mini-Me. Yeah, he's since passed away, which is really sad.
Yeah,
but he went on to play Mini-Me in the in the Austin Powers movie.
Wow,
he was a neat guy. I talked to him.
Oh, I love the Austin Powers stuff too.
For a bit, yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible. I mean, just
that was fun.
The things you've seen and done, like I'm just, like I said, I'm just blown away.
I got to be in a scene. What the hell was the name of that film? I was in just one scene with Danny Aiello, from The Godfather. He played the police chief. And it was just in a shitload of things. Really nice guy. That was a lot of fun. And who was what was it called? Moon Over something. What the hell was that called? But it had Angelina Jolie in very early on in her career. I didn't get to be in a scene with her, unfortunately. And what's the name of the actor who was in Terminator?
Arnold Schwarzenegger, or
not Arnold, the other guy, who played the guy who came back to save Sarah Connor.
Yes. Oh my gosh,
Michael?
I can see. What's his name?
Oh my gosh, think of it. Shadow, look it up for us.
Shadow. Find it.
And Ann Archer, I think, was in.
Oh wow.
Too. Yeah, I never met them, but
that's crazy.
What was that called? Moon Over something. I can't think of it. It's been a long time.
Yeah, I mean, you frankly you don't look of age to have been doing all that stuff.
You don't get to do all that much insane shit without putting on some years. I'll tell you.
I hear you. But wow, what? Just even that whole part of your life, just incredible, like just amazing. And I'm sure all that life experience and all the knowledge you picked up has definitely helped you in writing some amazing books.
Those 2 months in Sri Lanka were amazing. And Bill Campbell, he goes by Billy now, who was Rocketeer in Disney's movie The Rocketeer, was one of the stars of the Rudyard Kipling thing, of the Jungle Book. So I hung out with him all the time, because there was really nothing to do up there other than wander around the small town. They were staying, the hotel where they stayed had been Lord Mountbatten's headquarters during World War II. So it was very colonial, and there's monkeys in the trees and elephants in the streets. And we got to see a lot of it, the big tea plantations. And that was an amazing experience. Just being over there for 2 months was really, really, really cool. And a lot of my, in book 3 of the Paternus trilogy, there's an island, an invisible island they go to called Kamari Kandam. and they and a lot of my description of that and what it felt like, what it looked like to a certain extent, was based on my time in Sri Lanka. So,
wow, that is incredible. And thanks, Shad. Shad also has our back.
Michael Bean.
Michael Bean.
Yep.
So
Yep.
awesome. Thanks, buddy.
I knew it was Michael something.
I guess, yeah, listening to all that, and that also helps me to understand, when I was reading this, before I even considered your background, I don't know as much about it as I do now. Cinematic. That's how I would describe reading Paternus. Not necessarily like a script, not necessarily like right, but cinematic. The action cinematic, the scenes. It's very, in some ways, very episodic in some parts. Just like made for the big screen, right?
Especially I mean, a lot of the. I break a lot of rules with that, and a lot of that has to do with telling it the way a lot of screenplays are told. They have a lot less description, but they're first person. They're basically omniscient, because you can hop from one person to the next. Everything isn't from one person's, point of view. It's just not. It's very, very difficult to do that in film. So that's a lot of the reason that I wrote it the way that I did, which some people do not like, but I really wanted to pull, make it feel that way. And I took a lot of what I knew about screenwriting and filmmaking, and put that into those books, while also taking advantage of the ability to just throw these enormous info dumps in there. Because you can't do that in a script.
Dude, this was absolutely amazing. The any head hopping, didn't care, loved it. The present tense, which is something I don't normally read, loved it.
Thank you.
Loved every element of this book. I don't consider info dumping, because, like I said, I'm a history buff, a history nerd.
Yeah,
I was just geeking out every few paragraphs when you would throw this other either mythological or supposedly mythological character in, when you provide some context how these characters were related, how you would either affirm or contradict common mythos or legend, and then or you would come up with an alternate explanation for it. Just like, dude, I couldn't stop. It was just
glad
phenomenal.
Those are the kinds of things an author always wants to hear and doesn't always hear.
Well, I don't know, because we have to say, and I know you're a humble guy, but Paternus, yes, it's been out for a while, but you look on Goodreads. Currently, your first book, and we all know as authors, the first book in a series always will get the most attraction. You got 2,600 ratings on Goodreads, bro.
Yeah,
that's not a small number, right?
Yeah.
Any author of published in any ilk would be happy with very pleased, extremely pleased with having that kind of popularity of their book. So kudos and congratulations to you, my friend. That is,
and I hear good things about the Drowned Kingdom, and it is on my TBR. So.
Oh my gosh, I'm so honored. Oh, I don't know. Now I'm nervous. Someone like
now I want to read it. Now I want to read it even more, knowing that you're such a history nerd. So
yeah, I think that will come out if you ever get to it. I think that's going to be pretty obvious.
Yeah, history and mythology, natural history. I love all that stuff, but I'm a huge mythology geek. Huge, always have been. So obviously, from through everything in there.
So trying to put this in context now, going backwards a bit. So you have this amazing film career. You always wanted to write a book. You you get into academia, but you always wanted to write. You sought. It sounds like you sought a book agent as well, literary agent. For whatever reasons, that didn't work out. But at the time,
I didn't. Actually.
Oh, you didn't?
No, I did not, because I had you know, the film business and the publishing business are very, very similar.
Yes.
And I thought about it. I wasn't even sure I was going to publish it at all. I just wanted to write it for myself. I would get my other work done for the day, and I would go into town to the Starbucks, and I wrote all that first book. Pretty much was all written at a Starbucks or coffee shops up in Perrysburg, just this little town 6 miles away from the house. So I wasn't even sure I was ever going to do it. And I let some friends read it. They had some ideas, and I rewrote and I played with it and I tweaked it. And like the original draft didn't even have Molasses in it, the dog. I can't imagine that dog not being in there.
Maul? You can't not have Maul, man.
Yeah, and I can't even imagine that now. But I actually was thinking we need a dog. So of course I did some more research, and I was familiar with the Molasses dogs of Greek history. Really, they were real animals, and put that in. But I had always wanted to. The real seed of it was I love stuff where it's kind of like it's become progression fantasy now almost. I love something that happens in a lot of progression fantasy where you've got these characters who are extremely powerful and very old, and they run up against one that scares the shit out of them. And they run up against one that scares the shit out of them. And they run up against one that has a weapon that they know could just wipe them out at any point. You know, I love that kind of stuff, but I always loved the idea of the mytheme. Have you heard the term, the mytheme?
Yes.
Which are would be what really happened or either what really happened or the original story that then got spread around the world, right? Which is why so many mythologies have so many different, very, very similar stories to them. But what if they were real, right? And what if they really existed? So then I had to figure out, how did they come into being? What are they doing now? What's their history been? And then trying to imbue each one with their own personality and what they might be like and care about and not care about if you're hundreds of thousands or even millions of years old. So that and what could be the weakness of the strongest one, you know, because you can't have just one that's just so OP and can do anything and know everything. I mean, you can, but you usually keep those as gods, you know, that you refer to and maybe interact with once or twice. They aren't main characters. So yeah, creating that mytheme and then developing that into how that would work. And then what would it be like? What if, you know, you and I were walking around down the street chatting in Glasgow, and suddenly, and then we find out that someone we knew or see something happen that's just like impossible. You know, we find out someone we knew is a god.
I put my money on Miles Cameron.
Acadia, right?
I put my money on Miles Cameron.
There you go.
He's the guy.
Exactly. Miles is
he knows too much.
Miles is a firstborn. That explains everything.
He knows too much.
Everything. Christian is a firstborn.
Yeah, and you know, like I think one of the things with this book that really struck me was that, and going back to what you mentioned about having an OP character, you have one that's somewhat as close as you can get to being OP, still has vulnerabilities, clearly, you know, can be affected by essentially an illness that causes essentially like an amnesia. Also, however, right, like
his weaknesses are mental.
Yeah, but yeah, and Chad puts up, maybe Janny could be another one who could be firstborn.
Janny could be first.
She's got the intellect, and all the, like Miles, she's so multi-talented in so many different areas. It's kind of suspicious. Like, that's a good suggestion, Chad. Maybe Janny. But you also have, and you talked about, you know, and again, with explanations and rationalizations for some of the characters, what their real origin stories was. Explain the fact that in different cultures they were named different things, that their legends became, and obviously like anything that's word of mouth, it gets passed down, it gets somewhat perverted or twisted.
One cosmic game of post office.
Yes, yes, but frequently though, the reality of the legend is scarier than the legends themselves. That's what I loved about this book. And you talked about that thing where, you almost like progression where you have certain characters and they are completely badass. And then then this other character is like, oh shit, I don't want to face them. They're scary as hell. I'm thinking, oh my God, if they're scarier than this character, then what,
Yeah.
and that kept,
I love that stuff.
I absolutely ate that up. Like that kept
I sit there like a little kid watching stuff like that or reading stuff like that. So it's like, I'm going to try to write some stuff like that.
Oh.
Luckily, it works for a lot of people.
And it sort of worked for me, different knowledge jump. And I loved, and I don't call it info dumping. You gave us such a rich, and in many ways inventive lore. This universe where these essentially like demigods are hidden in the background. There's a war, there's a conflict going on. They all have their own individual scheming and political machinations. There's a larger kind of two sides, essentially. There's traitors that play both sides, or double agents. There's like all in the context of like, and beyond the pale, like almost like the Matrix. This is happening.
Yeah. But and then have a big fight.
Yeah, and then have a big brouhaha, right? Like, and it was just, I absolutely loved it. And then you have, of course, the people involved that don't realize that they could that they have access to some of these powers, that they're from this lineage, right?
Yep.
And then figure out, of course, well, how the hell do I use it? The stuff that's been happening is weird. I don't exactly know what my powers are. It was just absolutely phenomenal. I loved it. And the writing was fabulous.
Thank you.
Like there were some really poetic, lyrical passages here. Like I'm sorry, anybody who knows me knows that. I'm admittedly, I'm not ashamed of it. I consider myself somewhat of a pro snob. Yeah. And while this was very accessible, the writing was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful.
That book I had more time to spend tweaking the prose on that book than any book I've ever written. I love the Kraken Rider Z books, but they're for a younger crowd, or not necessarily younger, but they're accessible to younger. I don't use a lot of the expanded vocabulary, and I keep the sentences much more simple and straightforward. I don't do a lot of description of locations and stuff, just enough to get it in. But that one's certainly the one I'm most proud of for as far as prose. I even had to get book 2 and 3, I think, are pretty good, but I was in more of a hurry. I didn't get the years to just mess with the prose and mess with it, because I'm not a writer. I'm a good rewriter. And so if I have time to give things good rewrites, then I can do, I think, pretty well as a prose writer. But I am a rewriter. My first drafts are absolute garbage, and my second drafts are usually.
Well, all that we say, my friend, is a finished product, and the finished product was phenomenal.
Thank you.
I cannot wait to continue the series. I can't wait to read everything you write. But when we talk about this book, you mentioned, it was percolating for a while. You took the time to write it. You finally wrote it. But at the time, of course, you could have, especially with your connections, you could have decided, okay, I'm gonna hold it for a while. I'm gonna find an agent. Then I'm going to, if I get an agent, then I'm going to have them pitch this. And so now you're coming into the scene now as an author, and this is a time when, the indie landscape was very different from what it is now.
Yeah, Yeah, if you were in 2015, basically, because this came out in May of 2016. In 2015, I started to take it more seriously. But basically, if you at that time, if you were a self pub, you could be blacklisted from an agent. There were very few. Anthony Ryan was a very rare example, and Andy Weir. They were the only ones who really had gotten, agents and made the transition with the same books that they had self-published. Andy didn't self-publish it, I don't think, as a whole book, uh, The Martian, but had put it out serially on the internet and gained an enormous following. Not yeah, and did I get that right? It is Andy Weir, right? Okay.
Yeah, that's what we're talking about, right?
And
That's what
then
we're talking about, right?
Anthony Ryan, which is crazy because I read the book as an originally self-published book, and then now I've gotten to interview him and talk to him, and he's just and interact with him online. It's still very, very weird to me that I actually know people online, and then meet them, and I've never been disappointed. Never once I meet someone, which is really nice. But yeah, I decided, I showed it to some friends who are published authors, um, or screenwriters or whatever, and they're like, this is really fun. Don't try to get an agent, because they will want you to change it. They will not. They will want you to pull all the omniscient POV. I don't call it head hopping, but omniscient POV, and they'll want you to write it in past tense. And they were right. They would. Actually, one of my earliest editors really wanted me to switch it to past tense. But I was like, nope. Uh, like a little kid, no. And mine. So I just decided not to. I decided to go the self-publishing route. I didn't know anything about it. I just did as much research as I could. I knew no one. I think by the time it came out, I had been to one conference and, met a few people who gave me some advice. Um, and I got very lucky. I met, uh, it was the Confusion Conference in the spring of 2016, in January of 2016. And I met Drew, who had founded Reddit Fantasy. And at the time, it was huge, 80,000 people. Now it's like 2 million or something like that. But he actually got me an AMA spot before the book came out, because after we talked a little bit, he could do that, and he was much more involved in it at that time. Uh, the more we got talking, and I told him my PhD dissertation was on the Lord of the Rings and these other things, he's like, this could be fun. So he set me up with one. So I actually did get introduced to the Reddit fantasy crowd before the book even came out. And still, it sold very little for the first year. I mean, very little. Um, and started to pick up because I entered the year or the month, actually only the day after. The day after it published on May 16th of 2016. I entered on the last day the SPFBO because I had seen that on Reddit, because I had never even heard of Reddit Fantasy, but I saw them talking about the first SPFBO. So this was just the second one. So I entered the book knowing no one, and it had a different cover at that time. And that's where I first started meeting all these people that are really, really good friends now. Like Jonathan French and Phil Tucker and Josiah Bancroft and um, T.L. Greylock, Taya Latham, and Laura Hughes. And of course, then all these bloggers were reviewing it, so I was able to get these blogs and get these blurbs, and it ended up being a finalist and placing third behind Phil Tucker's Path of Flames and Jonathan French's Gray Bastard. So I don't feel bad about that at all.
Yeah, those are some heavy hitters.
Yeah,
those are some heavy hitters.
Yeah,
Jonathan French, love his stuff. Went on to read all of this Lot trilogy. Wow.
Oh yeah.
Won a Kirkus Star for the last one.
I love those books. Love those books. It's so it's been a very strange. It still amazes me that I'm here doing an interview with someone.
It's just me, man.
As a person with my books, though, but I've done a ton of them, but I still am like, wow, I could just message Mark Lawrence, and talk to him, or any number, tons of big authors that it's just so fun, to be able to be at Worldcon and walk in and there's Joe Abercrombie and be able to just sit down and chat with him for a while. And outside I'm like, yeah, we're doing this. How you been? How's the family? And inside I'm going, that's Joe Abercrombie.
But dude, you realize that people like me feel that way about you. Like, I can't believe when I realized, like, I'm gonna friggin' be interviewing Dyrk Ashton. Like, when I saw you in Worldcon, it's like, hey, it's Dyrk. And then realized, like, yeah, I had many births, but yeah, like, this is Dyrk Ashton. He's a peeps of the community. Like, but you're just so humble but like, as I started this broadcast by saying, people like myself, I published late in the game when I was a graybeard. I published at 51 too. But coming to Self Pub, dude, man, you guys are the icons. You and the Ben Galleys and the Rob Hayes and you guys are all the OGs, the people that we all look up to. So for me, it was such an honor to be like, oh my gosh, I remember telling my friends, I'm going to be interviewing Dyrk Ashton. Like, this is crazy, right? But yeah, so when
it's just me.
But yeah, you came on the landscape when you came on there, and it wasn't vogue to be indie, but you do so well. You're final at SPFBO, and SPFBO here now. There's something that's even just exploded. Like, the profile of SPFBO is now beyond just like it's definitely the biggest self-published fantasy competition out there, and the platform. We know how many people have gone, as you mentioned, to just because they were an SPFBO and they did well, semifinals, finals, or won it, they've gotten directly as a result, they've gotten book deals.
Yep. Right?
With traditional publishers. Like, I mean, the profiles, and I don't suspect that you were any different. I suspect that, there are a lot of agents trolling and looking to, but like you said, when it comes
they went from wanting nothing to do with it to now actually actively watching what's going on in the self-pub space all the time. And that's a big change, and it's been gradual, but over the years it's become there are legit hit books that they want to get.
Yeah, and potentially yours one of them could have been yours. Like I said, you have this big following, you have the credibility, you have the sales, you have the reviews on Goodreads and Amazon, you have what traditionally published companies are looking for. You have the personality, you have the charisma, you have the experience, background in film, you're an academic, like, you have the whole profile, right? So was there ever a time, or has been ever a time, or do you think will there be a time where you'll and for me, I know that I love self-publishing, and I think that's my you never say never, but I think that's where I'm going to stay. I love it. I enjoy it. I love the creative freedom. I love so many things about it. I know there's advantage to being trad published, but at the same time, I love being in this space. How about you? Because it is different with you, because again, you are an icon. You were one of the people that trailblazed and broke so that all of us could self-publish and have audiences to the degree that we do.
And I consider myself a latecomer, to be honest, because people, because like Ben Galley and Rob Hayes, Shad just posted he read Rob Hayes in 2013. Yeah, Phil Tucker, Ben Galley, Rob Hayes, and a bunch of others had been publishing, self-publishing for years before I did, and it's gotten harder now. It was hard to get noticed then, but it's even harder as a new author to get noticed now, because the more things become known, like SPFBO is now much larger than it was before, much bigger deal. That's because more and more people know about it, but then more and more people want to publish, so you've got a lot more competition. So I feel for people trying to publish their first books now. It's not easy, but you're doing all the right things. And then it's just going to be how it works out, because there are so many great books that just never take off, and a lot of really crappy books that become huge,
Yeah.
So it's just it's hard, and it can be sad, but you can't judge your success against other people's success. You just can't, or you'll make yourself miserable. It's like in the film business, you get a pretty thick hide, because you get turned down for auditions, you get turned down for pictures, you get turned down. I mean, it's just part of the business. Everybody does. And if you take it personally and you let it get to you, then you're just done. You just can't do it. All you can do is just keep plugging away. As long as you enjoy the writing, and maybe the social part of it, then just keep doing it. And you never know, something. Don't try to chase the latest thing, but write something. You have to enjoy what you're writing, or else it's just, I mean, there are a lot of people who do just write for market. It's just a business. They are doing this because they do it. And obviously they have to enjoy writing to a certain extent, but to some it's just work. And I could never do that.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
to my own detriment, probably, but
well, I mean, I same with you, and I think you gave some very sage advice there. I know for me, I just write because I love the story. I love what I'm writing. I try to be credible in how I do it. I try to be authentic to myself. And what small audience I have, I'm grateful for. And I may never have, for example, your audience, but that's okay. I have my little, more than just my mother and my wife want to read it, and for that I'm honored.
Well,
right?
you never know. And honestly, Paternus never made any money until the final book came out. And that's just the case. That's very much the case. Very often, there aren't that many single book successes that go on, like there are books that just suddenly take off, and you don't really.
The Martian just like.
Yeah, you don't really know why, or like I talked to Will White, and
Cradle,
he's like Cradle. I put it out there. And then it's just like I'm looking at the sales numbers and I'm like, what the hell is going on? Because he wasn't doing anything big. It just caught in the right crowd, and the word of mouth spread, and it became one of the biggest series in fantasy ever.
New York Times best-selling. New York Times best-selling.
It's just, I mean, he's up there with.
Oh yeah.
And most people have never heard of him. Most fantasy readers, traditional fantasy readers, have never even heard of him. And Ryan Call, I'll try to say it correctly. Shad just is one of the latest super success stories, where his first book just exploded. And he says the same thing. I don't know why. And it just did. And his series has become huge. So it's you just never know how things are going to go. Now, he did some research and did some smart stuff, which was cool. And Dungeon Crawler Carl, of course, even bigger. I mean, now it's got like movie deals and or TV deal, and just it's being traditionally published, and it's lit RPG. There was a time only a year or two, a couple of years ago, when trad wanted nothing to do with progression fantasy in general, let alone lit RPG. And now I don't know how it's doing in the trad space, but I imagine pretty well, because they put a bunch of money behind it. The covers are cool, catch your eye. But but I hear Matt Dinneman is also a really neat guy.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
Just a nice, great guy. But boy, he's just got to be. I would imagine he's just turned for the last couple of years. He's just turned around and wow, what the hell is happening?
And like you said, you don't know when something's going to catch fire or why, and that's probably one of the biggest, positives and negatives and mysteries of being an indie author, that we just, because we don't have this what is shrinking, very much shrinking, but somewhat of a marketing. If your book is one of those books that's lucky enough to have a traditional publisher really back it and push it, we don't have that. And everything we do is basically on our own, out of our own pocket, predominantly when it comes to marketing, promotion, advertising, all that stuff. And you try a sale here, it works, and sometimes it doesn't work. You try, you went on this particular...
Try advertising on Facebook, and then changing the ads, advertising on AMS, on Amazon, with Amazon ads, and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. And it's just, it can be very frustrating, but all you can do is just keep kind of plugging away and hope you have enough time to be able to cover all these bases.
And sometimes it could be just to mention, you go on a booktuber's, booktube, not mine, I'm not big enough, but you go on somebody's channel and suddenly someone else watches it and suddenly it goes viral and then everybody's buying your book, and it's just, but that's also the beauty of it is part of the beauty as well, though, of the wild unpredictability of why something will suddenly just explode. Right. And that's, it's kind of
Alec Hudson's Crimson Queen. He's the same way. He's like, it just started selling and selling more and selling more and selling more. And those are great books. I've read all 3 of the Crimson Queen trilogy, but it's but most of the time a book doesn't start selling more until the series is finished. I made very little money with Paternus until it was finished, but when I got the trilogy audiobook out, right? Which is what the icon we've got up on the screen is for, the trilogy audiobook. And that just blew up. And just, I've been so lucky, and it's slowed down significantly now, but that did really well for me for years. So it's you just you just never know. And especially today, you can pour a ton of money into Amazon ads and have them do nothing, or have them do a whole lot. The algorithms are so weird that you never really know. There are people with more experience who can say, but it changes, and it changes constantly. I was very lucky with Amazon ads for a few years, and then they just stopped working no matter what I did. So I haven't done an ad in ages. I did very well with Facebook ads for the audiobook, trilogy audiobook, for a couple of years, and then they just stopped working at all. So I haven't run any ads there for a couple of years. It's I'm going to need to do something, but my time has been very limited, and it takes time to do that stuff. And I've grown into being a bit of a wimp. All my life, to do all those things that I've talked about, I was 7 days a week from 7 a.m. to 10 or midnight, and that's just the way I was for many, many years. But now that I'm in my 60s, no, I won't do it anymore. I can't. I just can't. So I I quit it at 7, and my dream is to be able to write 5 days a week, still get my teaching work done, which I could do if it weren't for all the other life stuff that that has gotten in the way in the last few years. So it's it's uh it's life, so it's good, and I'm here. But but not my life stuff, family issues, health issues generally. Um, and it's been good, but it's I won't work past 7. I won't do anything past 7. I stop and it's done. If I could write and stop at 5 or 6 and then be able to clean up the house or do projects around out in the yard and stuff like that, and then or in the house, and then maybe only have to write or work 1 day a weekend, that would be great. But it just never happens.
Yeah.
It still has not happened, and I'm already way behind on the schedule for the writing of the 3rd book in the Kraken Rider Z trilogy. Hopefully I'll have time to get back started on that this week. We'll see.
Well, brother, I mean, and all the best with obviously the health and family stuff. You already have, I would consider, by the measures that a lot of us use, you've already been wildly successful as an independent author. Kudos to you on your success. Again, like you said about this book. I mean, you look on the back of your cover, you see Nicholas Eames, Anthony Ryan, Mark Lawrence, Fancy Book Critic, Kirkus Reviews providing endorsements. Josiah Bancroft.
Mike Carey on the front.
Yeah, Mike Carey on the front. Josiah Bancroft. Bookworm Blues. Sarah Chorn, one of the well-known indie editors out there. You have Fantasy Faction. I mean, and again, talking about the reviews and everything else, and the way we all look at you as one of those icons in the indie fantasy sphere. I think you've done pretty well. So kudos and I'm sure you will only do better.
Thank you.
As things go on. I want to quickly talk just a bit more about Paternus before we move on to some other things. So, you are based on what I've heard from you, you're the master of the pitch. So for those probably almost everybody watching this kind of broadcast,
I am terrible at pitches.
Probably
that's a common fallacy and myth.
Okay.
That I'm good at pitches. I'm terrible because people will say, so in 3 sentences or 2 sentences, tell me what Paternus is, and I tell this a different thing, and it's always terrible every time.
Well, I don't know. Let do me a favor, indulge me. Let us be the judge of that, because I would like to hear from the man himself. I'd like you to say what is the Paternus trilogy all about in your words?
And now I'm going to prove it that I'm terrible at this, and I'm not going to do it on purpose. What if all the mythologies around the world were real, and the gods and monsters from every culture were real? And what if today in this world we learned that is true, and there's a war coming, right? See, that was terrible.
That was not terrible at all. That was awesome. That sums it up so succinctly and so well. And like I said, I think for those, I know a lot of my friends, when they saw I was reading Paternus, it had been on their TBR like me for so long, and they messaged, "Hey man, so how's Paternus?" I'm like, "It is freaking awesome." They're like, "Really?" I'm like, "Yeah." I'm like, "I should have picked this up a long time ago." They're like, "Really? Okay, well, what's it about?" And those are some of the elements that I mentioned, right? And
okay.
but I also found what I loved about there's so many things I loved about this book. One of the things that I love the central relationship. You have these 2 characters. Like, I love romance, and I always talk about, I love romance in my fantasy. I love the sense of realism, relationships, love and sex. Those are part of life, and I want them in my fantasy. So you have this really cool burgeoning relationship between these 2 young characters, and they're both kind of a bit quirky, and there's reasons why they can't seem to connect on a certain level. But there's that going on. You have the characters themselves. Your characterization was phenomenal. You have this one character who later turns out to be a bit more than people thought they were. That seems like this really benign, very decent, but a bit stuffy conservative kind of dude, and he turns out to be a lot more than that. You have
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, obviously, and you have all of these amazing characters. You have this great backdrop, like as you I think eloquently described. What if all the myths were true, the gods are real, and these legends, and then also that, as we talked about, there's this war going on, this big conflict, multiple conflicts behind the scenes, and that some of these creatures, demigods, gods, however you like to describe them, entities, have lived for millions and millions and millions of years, and but yet they can be killed. Some of them,
Yep.
they can cease to exist. So the immortality is not that they cannot be killed. It's just that in the absence of disaster, they survive and they thrive,
Mhm.
right? And I found that all to be really fascinating. And maybe one of the most fascinating features of the novel for me was that when it came to how all the different, let's just say, without I want to be careful giving my spoilers here, all the different
Right.
allegiances wound up, that even some of the, typically the bad side, you kind of start to understand a bit about what their motivations were, just a bit. I'm sure more will be revealed in future novels, and it wasn't just a pure good evil thing. It's a lot more complicated than that, and I love complexity in my baddies and my villains, and that was so well done. So I think those are all reasons why I think people should absolutely pick this up. It is just phenomenal.
And and a lot of that I just stole from the myths, the trickster characters who, can be good, but they can also be not so good. And, the machinations that go on behind the scenes, the Lokis and the Anansis, and the coyote, in different cultures. Um, they can be really bad, but they can also have the right idea sometimes. And I really wanted to play with that with the Baphomet character, and you'll get to
Oh
see
yes.
more of that. It's funny. It's funny. A lot of people are like, he ends up, though he does some horrible stuff. He ends up being a lot of people's favorite character. Um, so which is really interesting. I mean, I loved doing him, but writing him, but it's yeah, it was a lot of fun to figure out how to do all that stuff. How to give these creatures, these beings, these great powers and intelligence and strength, but also make them vulnerable.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
so like even the strongest character, if you bury him deep enough, it's going to take him a while to get out.
Yeah.
Won't kill him, but it's going to take him a while to get out.
Yeah.
And don't do things like make everybody be able to like fly and teleport through space, and they all have different skills and different things that they can do.
And I love that about it. And I want to go back to this question that posed a while back from Shad, because I'm curious about that. I need to catch up with the whole series, but then I know once I'm done, I'm going to be looking for more because I'm already loving this. So I'm sure this is going to wind up in my top indie fantasy series. Shad asked, when are we getting the next book in the Paternus world? Will we get another book in the another Paternus world book soon?
Uh, I I have in mind and like to do, if I live long enough and can actually get the time to uh, write them. I need to finish up book 3 um, of Kraken Rider Z, And then I want to do a basically kind of a prequel series that ties in, that's based around a character that you'll meet in book 3, that happens about 20 years before this story starts. And it's more of the kind of traditional urban fantasy wizard demon hunter with a franchise, right? Only this guy's much more of a wandering. He doesn't have a tea shop or a private investigation firm, or, you know, he just wanders, and he's pretty miserable most of the time, but he just wanders. I think of it more like, you know, the kind of Ronin character, but maybe in my mind, when I think about it, it's more um, um, like Harry Dresden meets Jack Reacher, you know, that kind of character. If Jack Reacher were were one of these ancient characters, but not all that old compared to some of the others, who also had, you know, was a sorcerer, um, and could, you know, is wandering around doing these things. And that would be a prequel that would bring in some of the characters from Paternus. But I want it to be able to be read standalone. You don't have to have read Paternus. And it's going to be 4 to 6 books is the plan, but much shorter, between 85 and 100,000, 95, 100,000 words. And I want to write several of them before I even start releasing them, and release them like every 3 or 6 months, depending on how much it ends up being. And then I would love to do a follow-up trilogy that happens 15, 16 years later, 16, 17 years after the end of book 3, the Paternus trilogy. And these books, I mean, the whole first book, as you notice, takes place in one day.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one day.
Yeah.
The
One crazy day.
Yeah. The next book, it's over just some weeks. And then the last book is a little longer. But it's the whole story takes place over just a couple of months, really. And it's but the next one I want to pick up about 16, 17 years later, and then what the world is now like, and what happens there. So I had to come up with an idea for an antagonist that would live up to the antagonists in this book, and I think it does. So we'll see. It'll be some years before I get to that.
Okay, well, that sounds really exciting. Now I'm excited because I know I'll have years of reading your work after I finish the Paternus trilogy. Of course, we haven't even discussed Kraken Rider Z yet.
Kraken Rider Z.
You know, so gonna that what a cover! Wow, that's awesome. So maybe you can tell us about, or pitch a little bit about that series, if you don't mind.
This okay, the germination of the idea for this book. I was in this writers group with a bunch of friends, and we were talking about, you know, just kind of the state of the market. Just, you know, and of course we're a bunch of goofballs, and I'm one of the biggest goofballs. Um, you know, it's, you know, the farm boy fantasy is still big. I mean, people still like to see the kid getting caught up in this kid from nowhere, getting caught up in with a band of these people or that people, or, and then taking on this grand adventure, and they eventually, you know, become king, you know. The And that goes through just about every genre of fantasy, subgenre of fantasy. You'll see it. The uh, And then there was, like progression fantasy has become big, where it's basically the same sort of thing, but only it's more specifically concentrated on and described how they get stronger and stronger and stronger and gain more powers or whatever. Dragon riders, right? Just it just never dies. Um, Military and magic schools, um, and there were like several other things that we had laid out, and I said, "Ah, screw it. My next book's going to be," and I listed all of those things. And I said, except that because I don't know why, he just popped into my head, except for my main character is going to ride a kraken. And his name is going to be Z. I died. So a couple days later, Bryce O'Connor, who's in the writers group, who runs has Wraithmarked Creative, sends me a thing. I know you want to do your own thing and you got your own plans, but we'd really like you to do that. And I was like, thank you for the idea. And I'm thinking in my head, how the fuck would I ever do that? Right? How am I actually going to would I be able to even do that? With a kraken, with dragon riders, and the guy's going to ride a kraken. I'm like, what am I even thinking? And thanks, and we can talk about it. And then a couple days later, Bryce and David Estes goes, look, because this is what they do. They take someone like David Estes, who sells exponentially more books than I have ever sold, and somebody like me who has a name but hasn't sold an outrageous amount, and put us together. And I love David, and I love his books. And I was like, okay, I'll talk. So we got on a Zoom call and we just chatted, and it came out. And next thing I knew, I had a contract for 3 books. And a lot of things have happened that have slowed down the release of them, which is unfortunate, all on my end. But it's been a fantastic experience all the way along, and it was really fun coming up with how to make this happen, for this series. And the ratings are huge. It doesn't have a lot of ratings, but the ratings are 4.7 still on Amazon, and
Yeah.
4.8 on Audible.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Huge.
yeah, so it just hasn't sold a lot. It's just but people that do pick it up seem to really love it. Obviously, I mean, apparently from the ratings, it's a little lower. I think it's 4.6 on Goodreads. It's always lower, 4.5,
Yeah.
always lower on Goodreads. But because I think there are a lot of people on Goodreads who read books that they normally wouldn't, and they read it. I mean, they aren't like fans of the progression fantasy
Yeah.
genre or even
Exactly.
dragon rider genre or whatever, but they read it anyway,
Yeah.
and then it gets a poorer. I'm not sure how they're choosing their books, but it's very different from Paternus, but it still has. Everybody tells me they can still see
Yeah.
the Paternus stuff in there, and working with David's been fantastic. And this came out um, a year ago in November, uh, and finally, book 2 is coming out on Tuesday,
Hey,
on the 7th.
congratulations.
Yeah,
That
book
is
2 comes out
amazing.
Tuesday, ebook and paperback. There was a snafu between Audible and the narrator, as far as scheduling. So the the so the audiobook won't be out until late this fall. Uh, which is unfortunate. We had a simultaneous for the first book, but we'll I got to get book 3 done and get that out. But I'm very excited. Book 2 is a little longer even than this monster, and it's and I was like, should I do this? Should I agonized over a lot of stuff, but the best part about that was I can always talk to David. And he just always has the best ideas. And then I don't have to, you know, how it is. You've got a certain thing. Should I do this?
Yes.
Should I do this? And it's kind of a big thing. And then you worry over it for days or weeks and it slows you down.
Yeah.
But I don't have to do that with these books because I can just talk to David.
Yeah.
And it's awesome. And he's super supportive and always has great ideas. So that does make the process easier, but the initial readers seem to really, really like it. So fingers crossed it does well and boosts the sales for book one. And
oh, my friend, I'm sure it's going to be fantastic, but of course, I'm wishing all the best, all the success with your release. I have no doubt
you.
it's going to be awesome. It sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
Shad just has a question. He said, he asked, how heavy the progression elements in Cracker. He also comments he doesn't love progression.
Right.
You know what? And I want to insert in this, I have not read a lot of progression, lit RPG, RPG. Like, that isn't normally a subgenre that I read. I'm trying to expand my horizons and planning to read some this year. I think
I did not think I'd like it, progression fantasy, but then I started reading some, and I really like it. I am not big on the heavy duty, the hardcore lit RPG. Tables of stats and all kinds of these choices of things to buy, and it's like playing D&D or a video game where you have to do that so progression fantasy doesn't have as much of that. So mine has far less than a lit RPG would have. There are certain classes and levels you work up through, as a dragon knight, or in this case, a kraken knight. Now, of course, they have to do different things because he's a kraken and they're from the sea. And the whole world in Kraken Rider Z is basically water. It's all oceans. So they all live off the oceans with ships, and they use the dragon riders. They have an academy where they study, and it's very elite, and usually only the wealthy and connected get in. But as a child, Z finds a baby kraken, and no one's seen a kraken in 1,000 years. Some eggs have hatched, and one of them survives, and they can talk just like the dragons can talk. So they become friends, and they get separated for 10 years, and then they get back together. And of course, I don't want to spoil too much, but they end up going to the academy. And of course, they're outcasts, and there are a lot of people that are like, merfolk and krakens, and anything from the sea is evil, and there's been alterations to the ancient Bible texts, the creation scrolls that are the base of religion in their society. So they have to overcome a lot of that. And the other thing I wanted to do with this is a lot of people and a lot of the main characters are basically sociopaths. They're like, oh, I don't think I feel good about killing all these people, but I need to kill all these people so I can get stronger. Or creatures, or they're jerks at first or whatever. And I just wanted to make one that had just a really nice kid. And so he is. And there's some people that don't like that. They're like, oh, he's letting himself get stepped on and all this stuff. Yeah, well, only for now. So yeah, it was these have been so much. I had more fun writing this book than I did writing the third book of Paternus.
Oh, wow.
Because the third book of Paternus had so many moving parts and so many multiple characters and POVs and things that I had to wrap up and explain. And I had to have tables of notes just to keep track of, oh shit, I forgot about these characters. How am I going to end the story for them? So it was a lot, and it was a lot of work. In fact, toward the end, I was like, I don't know if I ever want to write again. I was very happy with the story, but it was really, really, really hard. But then this was just a pure joy to write. Book 2 was a little harder because it's a book 2 and you don't want it to suck.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but it was still, I still love writing these. I love the characters. They're just so much fun. So yeah,
Well,
I don't even remember what I started talking about, but
well,
Track Rider Z.
that's it's so perfect what you said. I just can't wait to get into everything you write. That sounds like a lot of fun. Again, expanding my horizons. That sounds like it fits right in that wheelhouse that I want
Well,
for
some
that.
people, and this maybe Shab will appreciate, have said that this is a really good book to, it's the progression fantasy for people who don't love progression fantasy. I mean, Cradle is progression fantasy. It's a different subgenre, kind of. Um, uh, uh, John uh, John Bierce's Mage Errant is also considered progression fantasy, though it that is even softer, like hard sci-fi, soft sci-fi. That's softer progression fantasy than than is, Mage Errant. Um, One of the early big success stories was Arcane and Sanction series, um, by oh my god, I forget names all the time. Arcane Ascension. Who the heck wrote that? Um, yeah, some people don't like Cradle. Cradle is more. It's kind of an iconic early progression fantasy, but it's huge. People just freaking love it. Yeah, Songs of Chaos. I would say Kraken Rider Z is more like Songs of Chaos. Um, Ascension. Um,
Okay. Okay.
much more like that. Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. And it's I just looked it up. It is apparently Andrew Rowe
Andrew Rowe.
who
Yes.
wrote
Yep.
Arcane Ascension. So
Yep.
so but I gotta tell you, and man, we could talk for hours. I just wanna quickly before we start to wind things out. I do want to get into a bit of your amazing, if you're willing to talk about just your amazing academic career because you're an academic, you're a professor, you teach. I know you said you do it all online. Like what is that like, and how is that now that you're continuing in the academic side of film and stuff? How has that influenced, do you think, your writing? How's your day job influencing your writing, the things that you learned there?
It doesn't so much anymore. But I had to do a lot of academic writing when I was a tenure track professor. And also I had to write a dissertation, which is very, very heavily research oriented. Luckily, I love research, but I also got really good at it. So the hundreds of pages, literally hundreds of pages of research I had for Paternus came naturally to me. And I probably spent a lot more time than I needed to, though I still believe that even if stuff didn't make it into the book, it still affected how it feels, how the story and the world feel. Um, so it was learning how to research and how to take notes and to decide what's important and what's not, that really did affect. Um, Really had a huge influence on especially the Paternus trilogy, and I enjoyed the hell out of doing that kind of stuff, and a lot of people just don't. I have to be very careful about going down rabbit holes, and but but again, I got pretty good at it because I had to do it so much for academic writing, because you have to cite and have exact sources and all this kind of stuff. But what's fun is that I don't have to cite anything in fiction, right? And I do change a lot of stuff, obviously, but I tried to be respectful of other cultures, myths, um, uh, and and still pay homage to them, and not like downplay any too much. So it's that was And I think maybe I learned a lot of that in teaching. It's a lot like grading, you know, you don't, or talking to a group of students in a class. You can't, if a student says something really stupid, you can't say that was stupid, or your opinion is pointless. You have to couch these things and be helpful, and continue forward and correct and do the right thing while, um, so yeah, that whole kind of mindset and approach, I had never even thought about that. I brought to dealing with the myths, and I feel bad that I had to leave some out, but I do pull in a lot. If you read the
Yes, you
whole
do.
trilogy,
Yes, you do.
if you read the whole trilogy, that's just a drop in the bucket.
Oh wow! I
Um,
will be reading the whole trilogy, so I can't wait. I can't wait.
and it's so it's been fun, and yet you probably also notice that there's something in Paternus to offend everyone. I
Yeah,
try to be
yeah.
very egalitarian. I try to be very egalitarian in 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 who I make fun of, or in who I and and tried to make sure that I offend everyone equally. So
Well, I will say though that you did handle with a lot of adeptness and sensitivity the different cultural myths. I was very pleased to see how you treated some of the myths of, especially some of the West Indian and African and South Asian
okay.
myths, which
There's more of that that comes in. I love the African myths, and it's like there is no African myth. I mean, Africa is one of the most diverse. It's just unbelievable, the variety of languages and myths, and just just so much fun. So there is more of that that comes in, um, including some African god characters
wow.
who
I can't.
who come in into that,
I,
into the story later, and they're really fun. They're some of my very favorite characters.
I cannot wait to read it all. Dyrk Ashton, I definitely be reading everything you write.
Oh, thank you.
I am so enthused about Paternus and the rest of your books. I apologize. I could talk to you for hours. I know it kept you an hour and a half. I want to respect your time and stuff.
It's
But
been a joy.
as we wind down, I do want to give the opportunity to let everybody know where they can, if they want to interact with you on social media, what are your preferred social media handles, where they can buy your books and things like that.
I'm still on the Twitter X. I'm on Blue Sky, and I'm on Instagram, all as Undyrk, Undyrk. Or you just look Dyrk Ashton. Facebook, it's just me, Dyrk Ashton, but then there's also a Paternus Book page, Paternus Books media page. I have a website, paternusbooks.com. I have, and you can contact me through that. And the books, all of Paternus is available on Amazon, hardback, paperback, and ebook. Paperbacks and hardbacks are also available. You can order them at your bookstore because I have them on Ingram. And I believe the same goes for Kraken Rider Z. Thank you, Shad, for coming.
Yeah. Thanks, Shad.
And the Kraken Rider Z is also on Amazon in print. And again, book 2 releases this Saturday, or this Tuesday on the 7th. So just 2 days to go.
And congratulations on the release, Dyrk. So happy for you. I know it's going to the launch is going to go amazing. Quickly, big shout out to Shad for coming by, joining the chat, and posing amazing questions. Be such a great supporter of Dyrk, and of course, of my channel. Dyrk, again, you're such a wonderful human being. It's been such an honor to interview you and to meet you in person. I have the privilege of saying that I met you in person, got to give you a big hug, got to get a big hug from Dyrk. And I do hope to see you again soon. Not sure if you're going to Seattle for Worldcon. I'm going to be there. Definitely.
I'm going to try. The schedule is a little weird with my this year will be a little weird again with the parents' health issues and stuff like that. But I definitely want to be there.
Okay.
Well, and I really love to go to Dragon Con again this year too.
Yeah, I heard it was amazing. I saw the pictures. Well, I'm wishing you all the best, of course, with your parents' health. And as Chad said, and I mentioned, have a good book release. Hopefully, you'll do me the honor of coming back on the channel in the future.
Absolutely.
There's so much more I still have to talk about. I feel.
I'd be happy to.
So the honor would be mine. Yep, this has been Dyrk Ashton. Once again, you're on the Drunk King Saga 7847. I'm P.L. Stewart. My books, The Drunk King Saga, www.peelstewart.com is the website. You can buy them anywhere you buy your books, Amazon, etc. 4 books out right now. 5th book, A Pack of Wolves, coming out in the spring of 2025 in a couple of months. And also coming out in especially the spring, part of the anthology Shapers of Worlds. Amazing authors such as M.J. Kuhn. I have my first short story involving like fantasy horror. So, hopefully people like it. That's also coming out. And where you can find me, all the social media handles are typically at P.L. Stewart Writes, the Twitter X, the Instagram, Facebook, etc. And you can find me on 6 Elemental Interviews, interviewing fabulous people such as Dyrk, and also with my partner, May Between the Pages, my colleague. She is incredible. Check out her channel. She's an awesome blogger. And you can check us out on Page 2. Quickly, just before we go, Jesse writes from Shad, the ever-present, he says.
Hi, Jesse.
What's up, Jesse? Thanks for stopping by. So, yeah, once again, big shout-out to Shad and Jesse for stopping, especially Shad, who stayed with us during the chat. Big supporter. You are what makes this type of long-form content amazing. Thank you to everyone who is going to watch the replay. I think, just learning about Dyrk is just fabulous. I'm honored that I got to do it, learning more about him. And again, hope to have him back on the channel in the future. So once again, signing up for this interview. I have 2 more later during the day, but this one has been absolutely.
You got a busy day.
I do, but this, getting to talk to people like you, man, it's just such a treat. So once again, thanks so much for coming by, everyone, and we will see you next time.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.